Hello, hello, my gorgeous ones. How are you all going? Well, this is your release, recharge, and receive webinar masterclass. So the inspiration for release, recharge, and receive, in part or most part, is because it's the wrapping up of 1 year and the stepping into another one. And I don't know about you guys, but my year last year was actively filled with a whole lot of releasing of stories that I had carried with me about myself, about my relationships, about how the world worked in general and for me in particular. And in truth, I guess, I've spent most of my life and in some form of mindful contemplation of myself in the scheme of the universe and all the rest of it. And that interest is indeed what had me doing 3 degrees in psychology and certification as a grief counselor, and now in my new incarnation as a joy reboot mentor. And what I have come to learn, particularly about releasing over these past decades, is that what we have been told by both mainstream psychology and a lot of the new agey aspect, of which I kind of sit as a hybrid in between both. But we're being kind of told that it takes effort, that you've got to dig around, that you've got to dig around in what you're thinking up here, you've got to analyze, you've got to do a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm here to tell you that you don't. That releasing is not, in fact, effortful, and it's not hard work. And the recharging and the receiving, interestingly enough, are byproducts of that automatically arise, and byproducts of that releasing and being in the present moment. We suddenly find that we have this recharge of energy, the energy that was always there, but we just weren't aligned with it. We weren't tapping into it because of our stuck thinking. And of course, that when we are in our heartful wisdom in the present moment, we are by default open vessels of universal love and abundance. And again, we don't actually have to do anything. I think very much most of what we're instructed in is a whole bunch of tools, strategies and techniques in order to, coming from a belief that we are not, and therefore we must do stuff in order to get. And hopefully by the end of all this, this webinar, you'll get a little taste of the effortlessness that is in truth our inner self, our innate well-being, and that we don't have to actually do a whole big song and dance, and it's not hard work to be in joy. So this is the impetus for release, recharge, and receive. It's also what happens when you are living a guided life by your higher wisdom, higher self-wisdom. It's just what happens. So, welcome. And what we're talking about setting ourselves up for success, whatever that looks like for you. It's interesting that when I ask the question, well, what does a fabulous 2022 look like for you? What's success for you? A lot of people will respond with experiences. achievements. I've got this, I've got that, I have this and that and the other, and then I will have this success. And I will pose to you something thought-provoking, that success is not the end product of a whole lot of doing, getting, achieving, and all the rest of it. Success is the start point. And when we are tapped in, tuned in, and listening to our innate well-being, our success center, then whatever inclination we have towards any particular action, by default, has success built into it. We don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff in order to be. We be and then we do. And I love that. And that's been a big realization for me now over the last 6 years, training in the 3 principles paradigm and working in it and implementing it within my own life, both personally and now professionally, is this notion that we have spent most of our lives going, that we need to do a whole bunch of stuff, achieve a whole bunch of stuff in order to have this elusive out there happiness. Then we can exhale. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the order of operations, thankfully. For us, it's not, in fact. And so all that unnecessary doing, we can let it fall away. And so for me, the notion of success is releasing what no longer serves you. The story in your head. Believing that that story in your head is solid and real as the table that this computer is sitting on. And permanent and solid, and they're not, and it's not. Our thinking is not permanent and solid. And all the other emotions that arise because of the story that we're telling ourselves. But recharging our energy through a shift in the mindset. So the recharging, feeling enthusiastic, I mean, like, believe me, I am 50 in April, and I would actually say, even as a kid, I have been all the way through, I have been a serious stick insect, as the saying would be, and very much focused on the what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking it and why the world and all this sort of stuff. I'm very concentrated and concerned. I would not have classified myself as particularly enthusiastic. Passionate, argumentative, maybe, you know, active protest in my youth of all manner of things, but I wouldn't say that I was naturally enthusiastic. And over the last 6 years, what I've noticed has happened as an automatic byproduct of learning to listen to that inner voice, not the chatter in my head, but the inner voice arising from my gut, from my heart, you know, that inner voice, the inclination, the instinct, following it, trusting in it, learning to not get freaked out by the story in my head or follow the emotion that comes up as a result of the story in my head, and allowing myself to be okay no matter what is going on, as I've become more and more flexible and adept and seeing that I don't have to stay in turmoil, that I can step out of it very quickly. I have begun to realize the natural state of our well-being is indeed joy. It is enthusiasm, it is curiosity, it is an open-heartedness. For sure, if I get caught in my thinking about whatever, money, my business, clients, opportunities, whatever the thing is, if I get caught in my head about it for a moment, yes, I get off kilter and I may well start having some thought created difficult experience and get in my head, but I see it for what it is very quickly. So it's not to say that we don't experience the downs or the low moods or the worries and all that sort of stuff. It still happens, but it happens less frequently. It happens less forcefully, and it just somehow, it doesn't throw you off when you know what it is to be guided by your inner wisdom. And so it's a self-recharging when you're in your inner wisdom. So again, this is like, you don't have to be doing stuff to put more energy in you. When you know what it is to follow your inner guidance as opposed to the story in your head. And again, it is the result of doing this. Automatic result is an opening of hearts, an opening of mind, and ready to receive. When you see that the story in your head is momentarily maybe quite loud, but illusory, and it's not the truth. And you get to, I guess, have your own Wizard of Oz kind of moments more frequently. And I love that, peeking behind the curtain and realizing that what you thought was the case really isn't the case. But the beauty is, in that analogy, we are both Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Lion and the Scarecrow and Oz. We're all of it when we understand that we are in complete control of our experience. And it doesn't matter what's going on out there or who's saying what or doing what. When you're in your wisdom, you don't need to take on all these sort of defensive maneuvers, or, as I would call, battle maneuvers, to control the outside world so that you don't feel stuff or feel more of stuff you do want and all that jazz. So very quickly, what we're going to cover, where our emotions are coming from. So for those of you who have been tuning in to my Wednesday story times and other masterclasses, hopefully you'll be getting a little hint of the viewpoint that I come from, the starting point. So where our emotions are coming from, the truth about how we experience stuff. And then because of, from that knowing where your emotions are really coming from. And when I say knowing, we're having an intellectual engagement here. I mean, this is the way our language and interactions work initially. It hits at an intellectual, theoretical level, but the transformation, it does not happen there. The transformation is not a, oh yeah, I get it, but a deep sense of, oh wow, yeah, I'm seeing that in action in my life, and I get it. I see it as an experience. I see it for your, and that's when these transformations happen without having to do anything with you. You don't have to think your way into your alignment. In fact, you can't. But I'm pointing you, but the point of this is pointing you to an awareness that you may not have had. Yeah. And so, yeah, how you can release the past without reliving it. We come from a benevolent, but unfortunately misinformed, mainstream trauma-informed, clinically labeled mental health paradigm and focus, or theories and modalities. And unfortunately, with all of them that have this idea that you're not going to be okay. So first of all, starting with the premise that you're probably at some level fundamentally not okay. And that you need to do a whole bunch of stuff. You need to analyze what you're thinking and why you're thinking it and keep digging at it. And then maybe if you get some understanding of it, then you'll be okay, maybe to some degree, or have a level of okayness, maybe. And it's unfortunately because it is rooted in a misunderstanding of the truth of the human experience and the truth of the core of our innate resilience. It takes you down those ways of approaching difficult pasts, unfortunately keep you rooted in them and not enable and not bring you back to your innate resilience. So whereas when you move forward from past difficulties, from the 3 principles paradigm framework that I work in, what you'll realize is that the more and more you are tapping into your innate well-being, the less and less inclined you are to keep trudging over hot coals of your past. In fact, you realize, well, I have an option here. I can make my thinking go this way, or I can make it go that way. And you kind of just go, well, why would I keep picking at a scab? Picking at the scab to see if you're healed underneath is not going to help. And so that is ostensibly what is going on when you keep rehashing past events in current thinking. And so we talked about effortless recharging a moment before. When we are in our wisdom, it's like when we are in our innate well-being and being guided by our inner compass of higher self-wisdom, it's as if we are permanently docked to a psychic recharging station. We are plugged into the universe. We don't have to do anything else. So it's a bit like one of those robot vacuum cleaners. My mum's got one, except unlike it moving away from the docking station and doing its business and then being depleted and having to recharge, I am positing that when we are in our inner wisdom and taking action from our inner wisdom, it is as if we are both moving around like the robot vacuum cleaner, but attached to the docking system at the same time. So we don't have to mindfully do things to recharge when we are in our wisdom. And when we come back into wisdom, like we will slip out of wisdom, we'll get a bit caught up in our thinking, but when we get back into that wisdom, we are instantly plugged in to the universe, and it's mega voltage. The other is you're okay, equanimity. You're okay even when the life outside is not so okay. You're still okay. And that when we're in the present moment, that's when we're ready to receive. So, have you been telling yourself things like, I know I have. Have you been telling yourself things like, that if only you had done things differently, not made those decisions, then you'd be happy now? Often the complaint I'm hearing from a lot of us single empty nester women over 40. Many of us who are single have gone through a couple of crappy relationships, marriages or what have you, and oh gosh, I can look back, I can see those decisions I've made. I can see plenty of them were not sensible, not at all. That that now as a single empty nester, you're at a new stage in your life. Your old identity is no longer relevant. Kids are taking care of themselves. You're not actively apart, spouse and actively mothering, and kind of in between things. On the precipice, you're leaving behind what was, and you're maybe stepping into what will be. And so for some of you, lost and overwhelmed, not really sure what to do with yourself or where to start. and that you want, but you do want more for yourself. Hopefully you have some sense that there is more to everything than, you know, the whole grow up, get a job, pay the bills, consume and die. That that there is, you know, yay, consumer capitalism, that there's more to life than that. And that there is, hopefully also, you're getting an inkling that there is far more to you than the sum of the events that have happened to you and the story you tell of them. And as much as you might be a bit scared, it's not too late. It's not too late to have fun. It's not too late to experience the freedom of being in your wisdom and not being led by the shoulds and the musts and the oughts and the fears of your thinking. And so I've mentioned the three principles paradigm before. The three principles paradigm was beautifully articulated by a Scottish philosopher and welder called Sydney Banks. He died only fairly recently, mid-2000s, so not that long ago, really, all things considered. But he had an awakening moment, an epiphany moment. Funnily enough, going to a couples counselling retreat with his wife back in the 70s. And his realisation when he was at this retreat was that it wasn't really doing anything. I mean, and I was alluding to it earlier, they just simply had them constantly going over the problems and talking about problems. And he just felt like it was a complete and utter waste of time, and that he couldn't put his finger on it as to what was wrong. And he was speaking to another therapist who was attending the event. And the therapist said something that just, it was how he said, or the epiphany that he had upon hearing what this therapist said. But the therapist said, well, you don't have to think about it like that, sensibly. And that just had a koan, epiphany moment for him. And he had an enlightenment experience, as he has articulated in a number of his lectures and books. And from that epiphany, he saw the architecture of the human experience. And at the core of it is that we are innately resilient. We have innate well-being. Just like our physical body has an immune system that is self-healing, self-cleaning, takes care of things, and does not really need very much intervention. It's designed to be self-healing. Well, so is our psyche. So unlike Christianity, that pretty much has said that we are, fundamentally, born of original sin and fundamentally flawed in some way. And then early psychology, as much as his theories have been criticized now since, but Freud's early summations of the inner workings of the psyche, he did not have a very good opinion of what our innate inner psyche was. He basically said it was a hot mess of conflicting levels of consciousness, and wasn't very positive. And so spinning out from his assessment of our core building blocks of our psyche was pretty much a notion that, well, you're never going to be perfectly okay you can kind of muck around with it with a bit of analysis or what have you. And that has then fed into the mainstream and into what we, possibly without even having an awareness of, kind of have this sense that we are not whole, we are not complete, we're broken in some way or can be easily broken in some way, and everything is focused on the notion of fixing. I mean, even the fact that we use the term healing. We don't really need to heal anything because nothing's broken. We just get momentarily sidetracked by the story in our head that our outer society keeps reinforcing as being really, really important. And we also live in a society that has made the idea of all the crappy emotions and the crappy thinking as being really, really significant, requiring a load of our attention and efforts to do something about. But from Sydney Banks's articulation of the three principles, which really, the three principles being mind, consciousness, and thought, but really in truth, it's a unified, I mean, I suppose it's the one, you know, it's the unified, the Trinity, the unified three as one, in the sense that they're all one and the same. It all interacts. Mind, consciousness, and thought. It is all part of the greater architecture of which our energetic being is plugged into. Mind being universal mind, not the confused use of psychology using it as interchangeably with brain and intellectual thinking, but universal mind. Consciousness is that spark in us, the bit that makes us alive, the bit that enables us to contemplating the consciousness, that awareness. And thought, when we say thought from these principles perspective, we are talking about thought as a paradigm. The fact that universal mind and the awareness of universal mind, so what makes formless come into form is through thought, as a process, as a paradigm, as an entity. It's alive thought, as opposed to what we focus on, which is personal thinking, ego thinking. And we've placed a hell of a lot of importance on what you are personally thinking and why you're personally thinking it. And then there has been some confusion in the crossover from psychology into the New Age spiritual space. Then also of what the power apparently of personal thinking. The power is not in the personal thinking, as in the what you're thinking and why you're thinking. The power is in realizing that it is just thought that is uniquely expressing through you, but it is just thought. And you are not your thoughts. You are not that personal thinking, that ego thinking. And the power is not in them. The power is the releasing of it, funnily enough. So, yeah. And so that in a nutshell, this understanding, the interplay between mind, consciousness, and thought is such that we are each living in the feelings of our thinking in the moment. But underneath that sea of thinking, as we understand, under this sea of thinking is our innate resilience, is our higher self-wisdom. And it's the higher self-wisdom that is in fact our true inner GPS, not the story in our head. But we live in a society that has been reinforcing in us that it's the story in our head that we need to listen to. And we even go so far as to say, well, the current conditions created by our thinking, personal thinking, that's reality. Stick to reality. And it's not. reality. It's transitory illusion. It's not reality. Reality is fluid and dynamic, infinitely potential. It's that whole energetic space. And that is what's in the present moment, which is not to be confused with our current conditions. And so, as I said earlier, the three principles paradigm, we are speaking at it at the moment from an intellectual point of view, because I'm kind of explaining it to you. But the truth of the matter is the transformation is not coming from an intellectual understanding. The transformation is over time, seeing how this actually plays out in your experience at a deeper, existential level. And so for the people who have turned the understanding into insight, have reported, as you can see the figures here, they've reported significant numbers in self-esteem, in seeing how they show up in their relationships and what they look like now to them. And this is without changing the relationship. This is about making the other person go into therapy with you to talk about problems. In fact, talking about the problems of the relationship only serve to make you more distant from the person, not closer. 90% reporting that, again, it's really counterintuitive in some ways, because it's not in controlling our behavior. You don't have to control anything. But that knowledge that you don't have to control what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, what you're feeling when you're feeling it, and all that stuff, and that you are okay no matter what the experience is, then you're not freaking out. You're not freaking out about your experience. So in fact, it's not that you it's not that you need to be more, that you experience being more in control. It's just that you, in some ways, I actually see it more as being that you realize there's nothing to control, and that's perfectly fine. And then as a byproduct of that, less depressed, less anxious, because your experience doesn't scare you anymore. And that doesn't matter whether it's a good experience, inverted commas, like pleasant experience, or still a difficult moment. You're just not thrown off guard, because you can taste the difference between being in your wisdom and being caught in the story in your head. So for me, not so long ago, I was caught up very much in regret and shame and guilt. I've been twice divorced. My first husband I married in my early 20s, 21, 22. That whole relationship and was the container for my birth of my beautiful daughter, thankfully. She's now in her mid-20s and happily married. This time she picked a good one, so we're happy with that. But yeah, no, I look back and just for a very long time, for decades, I'd look back on that and go, well, I'd certainly be a hell of a lot richer. I may not have been run over at high speed coming home from a job that I had to work because he was a drunken druggy bum screwing me over for everything I had. All the stuff. I had the story. And it was very interesting that I excused him a hell of a lot faster than I gave myself the mercy of the decisions that I had made, most of them unconscious and most of them unaware. I was not in full awareness. It's not like, wasn't quite like, well, I know that oven's hot and I'm going to just put my hand on there anyway. It wasn't. I was not aware of youth, I guess, young and naive. I wasn't aware at that time of the impact of my relationship with my dad on how I had developed my own self-esteem and self-worth. And funnily enough, thinking that I had rebelled against the image that I had of my father by marrying him, and the first one, and the first one in fact turned out to be, actually turns out the second, even though the first and the second husbands were completely different religions, completely different races, age groups, different continents, everything, the whole thing, they were different. But I look back now and I can see that both of them were showing up to me in the key ways that my father has been showing up for me over the years. But the window dressing was different. And this is what happens, I think. A lot of us get very caught up in the content of what we're thinking, the story, and how that makes us feel. And we try and control the outer circumstances because we've made incorrect conclusions about the meaning of things. And in the end, we play out the same lessons, but they look slightly different, but they are the same in the end. And unfortunately, between first husband and second husband, I was running with the incorrect understanding that is actually what's out there in mainstream psychology, the incorrect understanding of where my experience was coming from. So because I had the incorrect assumption of where experience was coming from, then the solutions to address that or avoid making the same mistakes, and that took me down roads that were ineffective, leading to incorrect conclusions, and certainly not leading to the only source of certainty, which is our already existent inner wisdom, which has absolutely nothing to do with our ego personality labels and effects of showing up in the world and having experiences. Completely separate ballgame. And because of that misunderstanding of the truth of my human experience and where everything was coming from, then indeed I had belabored under fear and self-doubt. And like many of us, we say things like, the reason I'm unhappy is because this event happened, or that person did something, you know, or I'm unhappy because my body isn't playing nice with me. I was run over at high speed and sustained a massive head injury in early 2000. I was 28 at the time, and that completely diverted my life in practical terms, in ways that are still somewhat impactful. So yeah, I'd blame my body. Then we're now, I'm 49, I'll be 50. This body of mine has gained weight. It got really skinny, then it got weight, and then it lost weight, and then it came out, and then it's been having illness and injury and pain. And so definitely I had spent pretty much most of my adulthood blaming my body, even my experience of my body, for how I'm feeling. Then the truth is, yes, it's a physical, we are physical, in a physical form. We do experience physical pain and that. And though it's not pleasant to be in a body that's ill or not functioning optimally, we don't have to suffer it. The suffering of it is the story in our head. The suffering of it is the meaning that we give it. And when that penny dropped, I I don't, I mean, one of the things that used to freak me out with my body and sort of the chronic illnessy side of my body, which definitely was psychosomatic, and so showing itself up in physical form, was for me kidney failure, UTI infections, decades of it, definitely tied to an early sexual assault, and then the first boyfriend, and then the, you know, sense of worthiness and protection and kidneys, fear, grief, the whole thing. I mean, I know it, but what enabled me to completely re-experience my body in a way that I had not been able to do all that time was not through the ordinary methods of treating the symptoms or doing things or actively, because I'd tried all those meditations and the affirmations and the hypnosis and all these things, all the doing in order to be. But see, the minute you, even if that doing is healthful by nature, if it's being approached from the perspective of fear-based thinking, that if I don't do this thing, I won't be okay, it's never going to have an impact. But when you realize that inner calm of innate resilience and well-being, even when the body's clapping out at you, even when the outer circumstances are problematic, it is from that centeredness that we can listen to our inner guidance, which may or may not guide you to taking some kind of practical action. But when we do it, when we take that action, then which may well be something like go meditate, do an affirmation, do some other thing, but it's the space from which you do, and this sense of already being okay regardless, that's key here. Now I'm going to move me over here because I couldn't read what. So hello from over here. And so what I've been sharing with you, well, this is what actually is one of the really interesting things. As I used to do slides, so I used to be very much do the slides, follow the slides, have a million notes, and it'll do it that way. Over the last 2 or 3 years, in this incarnation as a certified 3 principles paradigm practitioner, and listening to my inner guidance, not my inner intellect, I don't, look, I know hands, I don't do notes anymore. And I do these slides, I do them as a afterthought. It's not that I need them really. And now I also find I don't kind of follow them like I used to. So yeah, I've kind of been speaking as we've been going, and I've been sharing ahead. I've been sharing the whole time. So today I'm going to share. Yeah, I've already been sharing, but anyway. And so how I let go of the shame and the self-doubt, and what forgiveness actually looked like. Hint, forgiveness is part of that. But why forgiveness used to be such a huge issue. And I think one of the biz coaches out, mindset biz coaches out there, she actually has an idea that you don't forgive, that it's not about forgiveness, but I think that when she says it from that point of view, it's forgiveness as an intellectual exercise. But the forgiveness I'm talking about, and that's the forgiveness that I used to have a huge issue with, as an intellectual exercise, as a way of, well, this belief that you can forgive once you understand why. If you understand why and can see the mechanics behind it all, then somehow you can let it go, or something. I don't know. It was very, and of course, because anything intellectual is rooted in ego thinking, and the ego doesn't want to forgive. The ego wants to remain perpetually in pain and holding a grudge and having expectations and holding on to those expectations having not been met and all that stuff. And then from that perspective, forgiveness looks like something you have to do, like work on and do. And what I've realized is that when you when I realized my own inner wisdom and realized the understanding that the whole life I have created for myself is thought created, the conclusions I've made, and those conclusions that I've made in my life have been inaccurate and incomplete, because our intellect and physical limitation of being an energy being in physical form, our physical limitations are such that we can only see the world through the lens of our unique thinking. We are not experiencing the world directly. We are not experiencing other people directly. We are experiencing the story in our head about them, and they of us. And as much as we might try and have some intellectual, theoretical, abstract conversation about what we think we are experiencing, we can never take our actual embodied experience and put it into another person, and they can't do that for us. And we make assumptions about people's behavior. We make assumptions about why they did it, and what it meant to them, what it meant about us. And then we build a whole response to that. This is not saying that there isn't a physical world and people doing shit. They are. There is. And if you stub your toe, it hurts. So we are in a physical world. However, how we are making sense of it is unique to us. And it is incomplete because we cannot know the experience of any other phenomena. We can't. And because of that, then it's incomplete and inaccurate. And I'm saying this not from that we do this maliciously. It's an innocent, it's just how it's done with an innocent, we just don't know how to do it any other way. But when we understand that that's what's going on, then we can just be a lot more flexible and compassionate and merciful with ourselves first and foremost. We enable ourselves to be less rigid about the meaning we gave. So, I mean, like suddenly it just doesn't feel as important to fight to defend a belief. And this is something I want to say right out here. I know that there are some in the theoretical land, world out there that make a big difference between a belief and opinion. that, you know, and that one needs to be looked at with seriousness and the other one isn't. It's all just thought in the moment. It's all illusion. And so the need to pull it apart and analyze it, let alone fight for it and defend it, belief and or opinion equally, just falls away. It falls away because you realize that there's nothing to fight for. I can actually have goodwill for someone who I don't share the same belief with. Does that mean that I necessarily want to hang out with them? No, not necessarily. Does it mean, though, that I need to hate them? No, I don't. There's just more space for compassion for self and others. And that's what forgiveness really is. This understanding that sometimes we are in our wisdom and in the present moment and responding with an enthusiasm and a resilience that is in fact our nature, or sometimes we're caught up in the illusion of our thinking in that moment, and it looks really, really solid, and it looks really, really scary, and for all of your life it looks like that person or that event is causing your feelings, and all living beings want to feel okay. It's just, if you don't understand where that okayness is coming from, then you do stupid stuff to try and fix things that don't need fixing in order to be okay when you are already okay, but you just don't see it in that moment. And so you might say, and so how I've shown up, and I'll say, well, how I showed up. Well, when I understood that I made some really shitty decisions about partners and about myself and about, you know, and active decisions and the decisions of not doing, you know, I don't know sometimes what feels worse, the not taking opportunities or taking deliberate action that wasn't, anyway. But when I understood as an inner experience that I no longer need to go analyzing the what of my thinking or the why I thought it, and I don't have to do that whole dance in order to be okay now. That I don't need to understand why in order to let it go. Then it just fell away. This is the miracle of what happens when you keep tapping into that inner wisdom and trusting that inner wisdom, is the effortfulness that we put ourselves through to try and rid ourselves of crappy thoughts and feelings reveals itself to be a bloody waste of time and pointless. So you don't do it, you know. It is really honestly as simple as that. You just don't do it. It's like, why am I going to keep poking myself with a fork? I mean, why? It doesn't feel, it doesn't feel good. I don't like it. Why am I going to keep doing it? I don't have to. I don't have to keep doing it. So why do it? And then you realize that you don't have to keep causing your own suffering. And it does not matter how long, how many decades you've been holding a particular set of beliefs or thoughts or what have you. You don't need any particular tool or magic wand or anything to extinguish them. It is awareness and poof, they just evaporate, because you just realize that there is no point in continuing to tell that story. You know, and the answer is not found in the past. And you don't need to know why you did what. I mean, a lot of us think we need to know why we did what we did in order to prevent it from happening in the future. But the past actually is not a predictor of the future. And it doesn't matter how many times you or someone else or an event continues to show up as if it kind of looks the same on Groundhog Day. It actually isn't exactly the same, because energy is dynamic, energy is moving. That's what that whole saying is: you cannot cross the same river twice. You might be saying, but is that river? It's the same river, it's the same time of day, and I'm crossing it, and I'm crossing it in the same spot I crossed it before, so of course I'm doing it. Don't be stupid. No, the water that is running underneath you, the wind that is around you, just everything that is energetically dynamic in that moment is not the same as the moment before. And you can spend the whole damn day jumping from one side of the river to the other in that same spot, saying it's the same, and it's not. And you come back the following day and the same time doing the same, and it's not, because it isn't. You're not, it's not. Nothing is the same. Every new thought, every new moment is an opportunity for a fresh experience. And it only looks like it's all the same because we are in habitual thinking about it that way. But when you realize that you can show up without changing the circumstance, without changing the people in it, but you can show up with a completely fresh experience and an openness to receive something new in that moment, that you will. Without doing anything, you will. It's a willingness to be in the present moment. It's a willingness to release the story in your head of the past and the worry about the future and the labels of self that are simply illusion. And so all sounds nice. What does it mean for you? Well, it means for you that when you can do this in your own life, that what you'll come to start realizing in your own experience is that, you know, no matter what's happening outside in your world, you're not thrown off by it in the same way, or as much, or as frequently, or as hard, or whatever, you know, because you just know that there's this innate okayness that's there to tap into, even if you're momentarily caught up in the problem, the thinking of the problem. And that you are able to leave the past behind. When I understood, and I don't mean understood, I mean understood, that I didn't need to know specifically why the three key men in my life have behaved the way that they behaved towards me. All I need to know is crappy behavior is a reflection of crappy feelings, which arises from crappy thinking. And it's their crap. It's got nothing to do with me. I may have been on the receiving end of the crappy behavior, but what kept me in the receiving end of crappy behavior was my own crappy thinking, leading to crappy feelings and an inadequate response, i.e. making excuses for the crappy behavior and attributing it to me personally and my worth, and therefore staying in the firing line of crappy behavior a lot longer than I needed to. But it's their problem. And I actually don't need to analyze them. I don't need to know exactly why. They probably bloody well don't know exactly why. And truth be told, when I look back over, I really don't know fully why. The why is not important. The why is not the source of the closure. The source of the closure is coming back to that willingness to stop thinking about it. Stop picking the scab. Let the scab heal. You don't need to keep picking at it to see if the skin underneath is regenerating. Trust that it is. Leave the damn scab alone. You know. And the other beautiful thing that happens when you are in your inner wisdom and floating through with this innate enthusiasm and joy is that you find yourself more and more seeing that higher self-wisdom in others, even if they are momentarily caught up in their ego, intellectual, fear-based thinking and having some shitty behavior. You can speak to their innate resilience that they are momentarily not in touch with, rather than speaking at the behavioral display, ego display. That was another key of forgiveness, is the acknowledgement that even my shitty, abusive ex-husbands have innate resilience and are fundamentally okay at a core energetic level. They may never be in touch with it. They may never be able to see beyond their fear-based thinking and what their fear-based thinking is saying looks real. But you know what? I can send a prayer into the universe for both of them and for my father. In fact, the thing, yeah, my dad has been a source of difficulty and strained relation with him all my life. He is 80, he'll be 86 this year. I'm 50 this year, he'll be 86, a few days before me, being 50. And yeah, no, I could remain in a state of anger with him. Just quite recently, he offered support that would have provided security, had me getting ready for that, and then turns around and pulls the plug on that offer, and then feeds a whole lot of illusory nonsense at me as to, you know, he's stressed out by this, that, and the other, and it's all because, yeah, it was all very weird stuff. And I was talking to my, now pre three principles me would have been in my head about it. And I had been. I'd spent much of my adult life, my whole sense of my own financial abundance and ability to, you know, manifest and all that stuff, and all the stuff is directly tied to my experience of my relationship with my father and what that meant. But see, I spent most of my adult life believing that my experience came as a direct result of the doings of others. When I got to feel that separation between the event and my story of the event, and when I got to experience the truth that we are all experiencing our world through our unique lens, then the people's shitty behavior is because of their shitty feelings and their shitty thinking. Well, I didn't have to take anything personally anymore. And then that freed up a space for being able to choose to show up in the present moment in my interactions from a space of goodwill. I get to choose how I'm going to experience what's going to happen with people, even if they don't change at all. I don't have to keep experiencing them in the same way. The experience of them is mine, regardless of what they do. And then getting an insight and understanding. Well, I was talking to my brother just the other day about this whole recent thing with my dad, and him revealing to me an awareness that, yeah, my dad is definitely having some real mortality thinking issues. And yeah, he's going through his dark night of the soul. For me, I've had 3 near-death experiences before the age of 30. So, I mean, this is why I don't know anything other than being contemplative and reflective of my experience. But no, my father has led a life where he has been, at times, it would look almost willfully negligent of reflecting on his experience. And it's all coming rushing at him now. And so I can then, in fact, have some mercy for him. It was that would suck. That would be really scary, and that would suck to be in that state now at 86 and looking back and seeing one's life with regret at 86. This is not something this is why I'm now doing what I'm doing and guiding myself and yourselves, hopefully, is so that you can let go of any regrets that you've built up at this point and go from here on in, not adding, letting go of what was and not adding anything, so that when you hit 86, may we all hit 86, 99, 100 and beyond in good health, fun and freedom of self, but that we get to look back without fear. May we all have that. So, you know, this is what this, not intellectual, but felt experience. I intellectually understood a lot of stuff. I spent my life in psychology and grief counseling and that, but I was not able to have this experience of my father, myself, other people. I was not able to have this sense of okayness with people I don't agree with. That okayness does not necessarily mean that I want to hang out with them. This okayness doesn't mean that I excuse harmful behavior, but it just simply means that I don't get roped into it as an experience. And the beautiful thing of that, particularly in relation to harmful behavior of others, what had me stuck in my abusive marriages for the length of time that I did, is because I wasn't in my wisdom about them. I was in my fear-based thinking. I saw their behavior as a reflection of me and telling me something about myself or what have you, rather than it being an impersonal them issue. And had I been in my wisdom with them, I would have been able to see it faster, that it was a them issue, and seen that their them issue is not my issue to deal with. I would have been able to leave a lot faster, and I wouldn't have held on to all the why thinking, closure thinking, lots of activity trying to, because I wouldn't have needed to, because I would have been able to release them with mercy and goodwill, not condoning their shitty behavior, but certainly just going, well, that's a really sad indication of them and their experience, and it's got nothing to do with me. This is what happens when we show up in our authentic, innate resilience and well-being, is that we just don't need to, we don't feel the need to judge or defend. We just show up. And the beautiful thing is that when we're showing up in our innate resilience, it invites energetically those around us to do the same. And so what then often happens is those relationships we've called difficult fix themselves without having to have relationship therapy to talk problems, which only goes to create distance, further distance, you know. So that's what you can experience when you have this inner wisdom life. So there, what you're getting calm and clarity and confidence. You get to walk into once dreaded situations, no longer needing to dress rehearse them mentally for hours beforehand. You get to just show up, because what happens is when we are in our inner wisdom, look, Ma, no hands, I don't need notes. I don't write 16 pages of notes anymore to do these talks. I am speaking to you from my inner wisdom. I am comfortable with the fact that I'm occasionally pause. I'm comfortable with the fact that I've stumbled. I've said a few times. I might have repeated, you know, but this is who I am in this moment. And I am speaking not from here, but from here, knowing that whoever needs to hear this will hear what they need to hear, and it'll resonate. And it's not my job to actively fix people or change them. So it's, you know, so there's the freedom. That's the freedom that we're talking about. And then that's the enthusiasm and fun that you get to show up with. Fun isn't the byproduct of play or playful activities or particular activities we've classified as fun. You can experience mundane or even tricky activities and experiences from a space of playfulness and fun and lightness of heart, because you are not in your head believing a whole bunch of shoulds or musts or oughts about what you're meant to be doing in them and what you're meant to achieve from it and all that stuff. The world is no longer in control of your experience. You're not saying my husband is pissing me off, my job is boring, my kids drive me crazy, my whatever, because you know that it's not. And because you know that the world is not in control of your experience, you don't need to spend your time and energy finding ways to control the world. God, that makes life so much easier. Really, it does. Yes, sometimes life is going to be shitty because it's our physical manifestation. This life is based on change and impermanence. Sometimes that is sad. Sometimes that is difficult, but we don't have to suffer it. And as saying, like how my experience of my dad and how I'm able to experience him and my exes and myself with a compassion. And that compassion, from a Buddhist perspective, I will say, don't always get confused with compassion as just being nicey nice and letting people do shit. No, compassion is also wrathful in the sense that when you remove yourself from the harmful actions of others, that is a compassion for you. It's a compassion for them too. When you are setting boundaries and saying no to people that are causing harm, that is compassion. You may well be saying no from a tone of forcefulness, but it's not out of anger. It's out of not wanting yourself to suffer and not wanting them to continue suffering, not to add to their suffering, their karma, their whatever. You know, that's compassion as well. When we're in harmony with source, God, source, universe, divine, whatever label you want to give it, when we are by nature compassion, unconditional love, joy, radiance, abundance, all the cool stuff. We are that because that's our energetic being, and we are plugged into a universe that is all that by nature. So it is, in fact, our default factory setting. We don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff to make it happen because it is already there. And I love that. I love that about this, the three principles paradigm. Explanation, articulation of the truth of our human experience, is it saves us a hell of a lot of time and a whole lot of doing. The thing is that the human experience of being in this physical form is that sometimes we are in our wisdom, sometimes we are in our head and in our fear-based ego thinking, and we swing between the two, but we're okay. We don't have to try and like the tide coming in and out. You're not standing on the shoreline feeling the need to push the tide out or run after it and pull it back in. Both in and out are okay. They're all part of the dynamic expression of the sea. It's okay. And we can sit with that. Well, same, we can sit at the shoreline of our human psyche. Sometimes we'll be in our wisdom, sometimes we won't be, and that's okay. So that's giving you a little nutshell of everything that I'm the framework. Oh God, sorry, back forward. I'm trying to move me, the thing, yeah, over here, move me down there, over there. So that is the fundamental framework from which I work. This is my Awaken the Joy Within framework is inspired from the three principles paradigm and the mechanics of it. And my Awaken the Joy Within framework, the Awaken, an acronym, where it is, actually, I'm not sure what they'd call that as far as linguistics are concerned. It's both. It's both an acronym, as abbreviation, but it's also a word in itself. Awaken being, this is what happens when you are awakened, when you are in your awakened state. All that we talked about is happens, and that's the experience of it. But in terms of this, Awaken the Joy Within, the Awaken is 6 key steps to joyful living. Being awareness, being wisdom, being our wisdom being our guidance system, not our thinking in our head. Appreciation, kindness, equanimity, knowing that we're okay even when the shit hits the fan. And the N is for now, being in the present moment. And the present moment is not your current physical condition. A lot of people mistake that. It's not the same thing at all. So I've got a group program coming up where we will be taking all of those kinds of things, all that we've been talking about, and pointing ourselves back to them, and releasing and recharging and being ready to receive. And this group program is Awaken, Align, and Act. So awaken, so there's that joy within, embodying those 6 elements of joy and that framework, through that framework that I've created, aligning with that inner wisdom, taking aligned action from that. So it's not acting in order to be, it's being and then taking action. And so aligning with that and then taking the action, if action is required. Sometimes inaction is what we're inclined towards. And when we have this interplay happening of awakening, aligning, and acting, we're called to act. This is the basis of the freedom from the suffering that we create ourselves, and open to the fun that is in fact our innate joy and enthusiasm is in fact our factory default. We get to be in that state after 40. And so suddenly single empty nested life is not is not a space of bereavement, but a space of adventure. And so this 7-week, it's a group mastermind. It's going to go for 7 weeks. Each week we will look at the 6 elements. So awareness, wisdom, appreciation, kindness, equanimity, and the now. So 6 weekly group sessions. There'll be an exclusive pop-up membership group. And so the value for all this wonderfulness, of course, transformatively wise, is priceless, but the value, should we see, nearly 10,000. Regular cost will be 1,997. And there'll be 3-month installments available. And thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And I would love your feedback. Loving you all. Thank you so much for being a part of the community, and I look forward to working with you all individually and collectively. So, talk to you all later.